Something happened.
Friends, if I could have your attention, please. We're about to begin the service. Please, everyone, still make sure that your cell phones are off, please. And this booklet I have in my hand, which won't be a surprise to you, it says, I wish I said that. This is a new publication that Jeff and David put together this week with all of Barb's sayings from many books, as you know. We have a lot of them, but I'd ask you just to take one per family so everybody will get a chance, and they'll be distributed at the end of the service. So again, with your continued kindness now, if you can, refrain from all conversation.
In a moment, we'll begin with the great wisdom of Ecclesiastes. But before I do, many gathered here might not know that Barb, too, was a great source of wisdom. She actually compiled 10 volumes of quotes, songs, stories, humor, entitled I Wish I'd Said That. And I want to share just a few gems that I think could be appropriate for today. Tradition does not mean that the living are dead. It means that the dead are living. She also wrote down, God gave us memory so that we might have roses in December. And finally, the last verses of a poem by Judith Viorst. And the poem begins like this. It's called Legacy, and it says, since it's looking as if my legacy isn't shaping up to be peace on earth and universal health care, here's what I'm hoping to be remembered for. And Judith Viorst goes through a whole list. What I'd like to share are the last few lines that say, watching over the people that I love, grateful they're watching over me as well, enjoying whatever there is to enjoy until that final time's up, closing bell, and hoping, just a reminder, that I'll be remembered. And so today, with heavy hearts, we remember, and we honor the memory of Barbara Lazar. For Jeff and David, this is a time of immeasurable sorrow. She was the kind of mother to David and Peter, Zichrono Livracha, who knew what is most important in life and imparted the finest values to her sons. Jeff's sadness is summed up in the words of a plaque that he gave to Barb that said, if I could live my life over, my one wish is that I could have met you sooner, so that I could have loved you longer. Jeff and Barb's romance began at Syracuse University when Barb's father gave her $5 and told her not to come home until she'd signed up for Hillel. It just so happens that Jeff was Hillel's president at the time. It's as close to love at first sight as you can get. Now, some 57 years later, Barb's death is untimely. We all know that her health struggles took its toll. It was over 50 years ago that Barb was diagnosed with diabetes, and 20 years ago that she received a kidney, the gift of life from David. Most of us can only imagine how exhausting life is every day when one suffers from a chronic condition. And yet, to focus only on the pain would be to miss out on the many blessings. When I asked David how he would describe his mother, he had no shortage of adjectives. She was kind, generous, and what I love, he said, she was genuine. Inasmuch as it is painful to say goodbye, it is a holy act to respect Barb's wishes not to prolong her life without quality, to support her choice to die with dignity. Jeff and David will share words of eulogy, but I want to share a few words from my perspective too, because I was the beneficiary of Barb's kindness and generosity on so many levels. I always appreciated her directness. I found it so refreshing. She was a fabulous baker, and sharing her baked goods was just one way she would express her gratitude, and I see the nods. It is no exaggeration to say that her compilations in her 10 volumes of I Wish I'd Said That have given me countless hours of joy and ideas upon which to ruminate. Words from Ecclesiastes. L'kol zman ve'et l'chol chefetz tachat hashamayim. There is a time for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for destroying and a time for healing, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering stones, a time for embracing and a time to refrain from embraces, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for keeping and a time for discarding, a time for tearing and a time for sowing, a time for silence and a time for speaking, a time for loving and a time for hating, a time for war and a time for peace. And the words of Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. A good wife who can find? Her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband trusts in her, and nothing shall he lack. She renders him good and not evil all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is robed in strength and dignity and cheerfully faces whatever may come. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She tends to the affairs of her household and eats not the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband too, and he praises her. Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Place before her the fruit of her hands. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. And now I'd like to share a chant of the 23rd Psalm. Mismor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binodeh sheyarbitzeni, al mei menuchot yenachaleni, nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'magle tzedek, למען שמו, גם כי אלך בגצל מוות, לא אירא רע, כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך, המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן, נגד צורריי. דשנת בשמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני, לאורך yamim. I'd like to invite you, if you will join me in this translation of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, in mourning, we gather for two reasons. We gather to comfort the bereaved and to honor the memory of the deceased. So I'd like to now invite Jeff and David, if they will, to share memories.
Thank you, Cantor Suffren. Thank all of you for being here today. I'm absolutely overwhelmed by this. I think my dad is. I know my mother would be too. I know for all of us gathered here, today is one of mixed emotions. Sadness for losing someone so special, and gratitude for being so blessed to have had someone of my mom's, our beloved Barb's, caliber in our lives. My father and I are so honored today to look out and see so many members of our family and our extended family, all of you who got to know Barb personally or through us, here today to celebrate the amazing person that she was. As anyone who got to know my mom over the years can attest, the last thing she'd want is for us to be morose or maudlin today. Hers was such a loving, generous, and infectiously positive presence. My mom was an especially humble person and would often remark to my dad and me that when this day came, just put me in the ground and say Kaddish over me. I don't need anything more than that. Well, we think she's earned something a little more gussied up than that. And so today is as much a remembrance as it is a celebration of a truly remarkable life and of someone who, through her grace, generosity, friendship, immense warmth and wit, and example, remains very much a part of us. In late May, when we received the news of my mom's diagnosis and learned of her decision to forego treatment, it was inarguably the worst day of my life. My mom, as many of you know, was a type 1 insulin-dependent diabetic for over 50 years, who, in spite of the day-after-day grind that disease inflicts on one's body, never let it cloud her outlook or interfere with living a full life, one of raising a family and of helping improve the lives and spirits of others through the kind of giving that she did. To this end, she was also a deeply philosophical person who recognized the importance of quality of life, of appreciating what you have, and understanding that there are indeed things that are out of our control. And so, as we sat outside the cancer center that day in late May, waiting for my dad to come around with the car, she studied the distress on my face from her wheelchair, quizzically, almost scientifically. In typical Barb fashion, she said, "What, did you think I was going to live forever? Honey, we all have to go at some point. But I want you to know that you'll always be my little buddy, and that you can always talk to me, just as long as it's not about the news." And that is who my mother was to me. For any of you who have gotten to know me over the years, you know of the closeness I enjoyed with my mom, the 4 to 5 calls a day, the weekend visits and dinners, the pilgrimages to Maine and Cape Cod for fried clams and blueberry pancakes and glimpses at the ocean, the unerring and limitless support and laughter through life's peaks and valleys, the kidney transplant, the first person I'd rush to call when something good or funny had happened. This bond between Jewish moms and sons, of course, isn't entirely unique to us, but the one we had was pretty darn special. My mom was, of course, a lot of things: a teacher, a friend, a volunteer, a writer, a baker, a devoted and loving wife. But I think being a mother was what God had most in mind for her, and where she shined brightest. If there was one thing I never lacked throughout my life, it was love for my mother, for whom I would always be her little Davy. It developed at an early age. I think about the woman who'd without question schlep her 2 Zoftig children in her overburdened little Chevette to every game and sports practice in the summer swelter of Atlanta, full well knowing I wasn't going to win anything, except maybe the same most improved player trophy every year, but always cheering me on nonetheless and taking me to Pizza Hut even when I'd blow the last play of the game. Who'd check us out from school early to go see a matinee, or rather to go to a doctor's appointment, always stopping at the Burger King beforehand to save on sodas, which she'd delicately place in her purse using the cardboard caddy that they would give us, until the one day the caddy ruptured, and as we were walking into the theater, and her purse became a Niagara Falls of Mr. Pibb. I think of the woman who took me in as an ungainly, awkward early teen, who was never invited to parties and had few friends, and so instead brought me to dinners with her friends from the library, a group of incredible golden girls who knew more about life and had more interesting, funny things to say than any of the zeros in high school who'd pay me no mind. My mom would often say, "Honey, if they don't want to be friends with you, that's their loss. They don't know what they're missing, and they're not worth your time. Now, as a kid struggling to fit in, those words are, of course, of little consolation. As a grown-up, you realize just how true they are and the importance of quality over quantity in friendships. And there was never a better friend than her, or example, a realization and an appreciation that only grew deeper over the years. Nearly 30 years ago, this is how far ahead of her time she was. My mom left my brother and me an ethical will, laying out a set of values and instructions for leading a rich and fulfilling life. This is 1994 that she did it. Things like the importance of hard work and self-discipline, not taking shortcuts, showing gratitude, recognizing the greatness of this country and the opportunity it provides, being true to yourself and your beliefs, adjusting to life's changing path, and not procrastinating. We're still struggling with that one. And that separately, Hellmann's mayonnaise, Land O'Lakes butter, and Skippy peanut butter were worth their weight in gold, and that chocolate was a vegetable. The entry, however, that stands in bold relief and defines so much of who my mom was and remains to so many of us here today was something her own father, a World War II veteran, had passed on to her. Quote, "Try and make someone happy each day," she said, "be it with a smile, a hug, a compliment, a kind word, a telephone call, a good deed. Believe me, it'll make you a happier person. I've always found that giving is its own reward. You feel good." Looking out here this afternoon, I'm so heartened to see so many of the people from all walks of life my mom connected with over the years. Neighbors, friends, congregants, service workers, physicians, veterans, loved ones, who genuinely brightened her life, and who likewise benefited from my mom's bright, beautiful smile and her penchant for quiet giving. Whether through cakes and cookies, cards, gifts, literature, phone calls, article clippings, donations, or prolific letter writing, my mom was the most proudly analog person I knew, never owning a cell phone or even an email address, always preferring to do things by hand or over the old landline. Her last car had manual windows, and she always had a transistor radio handy, even when her arthritis and diabetes were getting the better of her. And the number of pen pals she had were legion. And then there were the books, 11 volumes, including the greatest hits, in all, of collected poetry, quotes, songs, essays, and Americana that she published with my dad's help over a 15-year period. My mom was always a serial clipper, another trait she inherited from her dad, and in addition to the stack of articles I'd always find waiting for me on my desk when I'd arrive home for a visit, she absolutely loved to pull and share with others stories, songs, classic movies, poems that she found enriching or funny, reflected her values, and celebrated the best this nation had to offer. Those books, which now sit, many of them earmarked, on hundreds of coffee tables and books and nightstands, are indeed a legacy of hers and a reflection of the love she had for those who received them and for this amazing country. Now, this generosity of my mother's, of course, didn't stop at cards, gifts, baking, and books. It also extended to her opinion. As so many of you who know me can recall from my stories, and many of you who knew her well, my mother was the most direct person I knew. She'd give it to you right between the eyes, whether you were ready for it or not. Whether for an ill-chosen word, an inconsiderate or shallow act, a poor fashion or decorating choice, I often said there were three M's I feared in life most: moving, mathematics, and my mother's judgment. My father and I were the most frequent beneficiaries of this bluntness over the years, as were my first condo, and distressingly, a couple of my crummy bosses. Those instances always followed up by a pulse-quickening phone call to me. "Davey, I don't want you to be mad at me, but I had a talk with so-and-so." Or in one case, "I called the White House." Or anyone else, for that matter, she felt had treated me or others she cared about shoddily or unfairly. And how could you be mad at her? You can't stop a mama bear in a flour-dusted sweatshirt, and you also couldn't help but love her for the care and immense heart she showed. My mother was the most authentic person I knew, never an ounce of artifice or pretense, never a word of pettiness or meanness, always, however, expecting the best from you and demonstrating an amazing capacity and willingness to help you get there. As a close friend remarked to me the other day, David, you hit the jackpot of life and the mother you had. Boy, did I ever. And boy, am I grateful for the time that we had. Were you to ask me where in the world I'd most like to be, a Balinese getaway, a chalet in the Swiss Alps, a yacht in the Adriatic, I would always say the same thing, that there was never a place better than sitting alongside her on the bed in the middle of a lazy weekend afternoon, the lights dimmed, holding hands, watching an old movie, an episode of Monk, or a Hercule Poirot mystery, in which we'd inevitably fall asleep during the convoluted conclusion. It's in those simple things, the laughs, the comfort, and the silences that you enjoy together, that you draw so much of life's meaning, which is to be there for one another. One of my closest friends, a mentor from college, met my mom all of once at my graduation down in Washington, D.C., and was instantly smitten. They maintained an epistolary friendship over the last 25 years that was remarkable. I mean, after meeting her all at once, and in a recent letter to my father and me, he summed things up perfectly. Our dear friends, David and Jeff, Jenny and I and our sons, Tim and Paul, are deeply grieving with you over the death of Barb. She was an extra special friend and a lady in the front rank, and we are missing her deeply already and always shall. There are so many stories and fine qualities that comprise her life, and it somehow seems so fitting that she would leave us on the cusp of Independence Day, because she was a peerless patriot and a person who was never in doubt about the timeless qualities of America and our greatest traditions. The most important thing to say about Barb is that in an increasingly difficult culture, she was a genuine and true lady, and it was so refreshing to have a cherished friend whose standards were unwavering and whose love of her family and country were second to none. She was my fellow lover of Turner Classic Movies, and I always thought of her as the Golden Lady of New England, who loved the golden era of American film. You both have all of our sympathy and love and hugs, and you shall remain in our prayers, on our hearts, and across the days and weeks ahead. What a sterling husband and son you were to our beloved Barb. We shall never forget her. I take from Psalm 73. Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. These last 3 months have been a journey for sure, the kind that none of us seeks out. In spite of this, I take solace in the time we had with this remarkable lady, my very best friend, and comfort in now knowing that God has taken my mom's hand and softly and lovingly walked her to a far better place, where her smile can shine as brightly as it did in all of our lives. My mother's name in Hebrew, as some of you know, is Barucha, which means blessing. May her memory likewise always be a blessing for all of us who knew and loved her. Thank you.
Barb would have asked me if I'd remembered to bring my cane with me. Thank you all for coming and for your support. I wish the circumstances were different, that we weren't here and that we were elsewhere doing pleasant things with people we care about. Your being here is an incredibly kind mitzvah, for which expression of gratitude is totally inadequate. Your being here is eloquent testimony of how deeply Barb touched so many lives. And when speaking of inadequate, there is something rather preposterous in trying to summarize Barb's life in a few minutes. Reluctantly, I want to try and share a flavor of the most remarkable person I've ever known, my best friend, the love of my life, someone whom I consider to be a once-in-a-generation woman, the one who gave me and my son David our marching orders. There are some coincidences which border on a cosmic sense of irony. 39 years ago, our son Peter became a bar mitzvah, and his Torah portion was called Chaye Sarah, called the life of Sarah. Came from the 23rd chapter of Genesis, beginning with the first verse. And in there, Peter read, Vayihiyu Chaye Sarah Mea Shana Ve'esrim Shana Ve'sheva Shanim Shnei Chaye Sarah, which, as you know, in French means, and the life of Sarah was 127 years. Such were the years of the life of Sarah. The second verse is where the punchline comes in. Vatamot Sarah bekiryat arba, hi Chevron be'eretz Canaan, vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'livkota. And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Chevron, in the land of Canaan, and Abraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. It doesn't take a great deal of imagination to substitute Barb's 75 years for Sarah's 127, or Waltham for Kiryat Arba, or to substitute David's and my name for Abraham's, who came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. But the coincidence continues. Abraham approaches the Hittites to purchase a burial plot for Sarah. They are prepared to give him free of charge the choicest of their burial plots. But Abraham demurs and says, no, I want to pay the full price. And so this way he could honor his wife Sarah. And that way the cave of Machpelah became the final resting place for Sarah, as it did later on for members of her family. And if one were to look out here at this setting, Barbara's parents are buried here. Her grandmother is buried here. Our son and David's brother Peter is buried here. Well, you can figure that one out. Another coincidence, and both Cantor Suffren and David mentioned this, but those of you who know me know that the word brief and me are total strangers to one another. Matter of fact, years ago, Barb cut a cartoon out of the New Yorker, which had a picture of a pastor standing in front of his flock, ready to address his constituents with a sermon. Behind him lay a set of golf clubs, and the caption underneath read, "I shall be brief." In 1965, as Barb set out for Syracuse, her father gave her a $5 bill and said, "Don't call home until you've joined Hillel." And fortunately, the Hillel rabbi, this is true, his name was Rabbi Elephant, had a previous engagement, and so he asked me as president of Hillel to stand in for him that night. I signed Barbara up along with other folks, but that was September 12th, 1965. 11 days later, which coincided with her father's birthday, September 23rd of 1965, I stopped in at a freshman Hillel Council meeting, and I couldn't take my eyes off of her. It was just, and she couldn't take her eyes off of me. I didn't think it was because that I had some kind of thing growing on my shirt or whatever. But at any rate, interestingly enough, at that time, Frank Sinatra had come out with a song, Strangers in the Night. Strangers in the night, exchanging glances, wondering in the night what were the chances we'd be sharing love before the night was through. Something in your eyes was so inviting, something in your smile. God, that smile was remarkable. Something in your smile was so exciting. Something in my heart told me I must have you. Strangers in the night, two lonely people, strangers in the night, until the moment that we said our first hello. Little did we know that love was just a glance away, a warm, embracing dance away, and ever since that night, we've been together, lovers at first sight, in love forever. It turned out so right for strangers in the night. We were inseparable for more than 57 years. When I first met Barb, she was doing 3 different things. Taking loads of pictures with her Brownie Hawkeye camera. She was always looking, she was collecting quotes, and she was always looking for opportunities to give gifts to others. As for the quote collecting, she began filling up a folder with sparkling gems, poetry, thought pieces, song lyrics, pithy quotes, and Americana. After we had moved to the Boston area, she had me put together her choicest pieces, which became, I wish I'd said that, Volume 1, which then led to Volume 2, which then led to Volume 3, which finally led to the 11th and final volume, which was Barb's Favorites, a modest book of 217 pages. At any rate, as for gifting people, Barb was an incredible baker, and she would bake different cakes and cookies, wrap them up in aluminum foil, and give them out as holiday care packages. Recipients looked forward to her amazing, yeah, I'm biased, sour cream chocolate chip coffee cake. And bringing one of these to a recipient, I'll tell you, these recipients came to cherish these gifts in advance, and well, I got lots of nachas from this. It's a French word for joy, and just the idea of being able to be her delivery boy. In terms of the photographs, her spirituality took on a whole new dimension when she saw the awesome power of the ocean rushing toward the shore, or a breathtaking sunrise. Her collection of these photos and being drawn to them was a testament to God's brilliance and a recognition of her tiny part in the universe. Barb was a stickler for cleanliness. Our home was always neat, and she made sure to share the wealth. "Jeffrey," she would ask, "what day is it today?" And I would dutifully respond, "It's vacuum day." Barb was a prolific letter writer. She believed in writing notes to different people to thank them for their kindness. If someone wrote to her, she would answer back the very same day. She was forever selecting special cards, and she took great pains to select the messages that were appropriate within the cards themselves. If it didn't get up to her standards, they weren't bought, let alone go out. She never forgot any of people's birthdays or anniversaries. They were written, all of them, in at the top of each and every month of her calendar. So she always made sure to send out a card or make a phone call. She also would send out, in timely fashion, cards such as "Thinking of You." They went out frequently. Her thoughtfulness was eloquently illustrative of who she was. To kind of reprise something that David said, if at the end of the day you can bring a smile to someone's face, you've had a good day, she would say. Barb had a great sense of humor. Often dry, oftentimes something that would hit you between the eyes. For our 50th wedding anniversary a few years ago, she gave me a framed photograph. There she was in her wedding gown, I in my formal attire. And next to it, there was an art piece from Story People, which read, "You are the strangest person I have ever met," she said. And I said, "You too." And we decided we'd know each other for a long time. Knowing my trait of procrastination, Barb gave me a small sign which made its way onto one of my bookshelves at Temple, which said, "If it weren't for the last minute, a lot of things wouldn't get done around here." And one more example, because she was the consummate planner. A sign hanging on the wall in our kitchen area reads, "Lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part." Barb was the most organized person I ever knew. She anticipated things in advance and was legion in making lists and leaving little reminder notes all over the house. "Drive carefully. Do you have your wallet and keys? Clean kitchen." She didn't like unnecessary surprises, so that organized mind of hers was always working. Being an insulin-dependent diabetic for more than 50 years provides a rare perspective of how valuable good health is. As well as I knew Barb, I could never imagine the challenges she would face every day dealing with a chronic condition. As a result, there were a number of times when she said to David and me, "It would just be so much easier if I weren't here anymore." Having the privilege of being her caregiver meant that I could do a variety of things that would make things easier. I shall miss that, and I shall miss the opportunity to sit next to her in companionable silence, watching an old movie or a baseball game. Back in 2005, when I sort of retired, and I told Barb of my decision, her comment was, "Jeffrey, if you are around me 24/7, I think I'll kill you." But believe me when I tell you that being her caregiver was one of the probably the richest and best thing I've ever done. Some time ago, in one of the many catalogs that come to us all too frequently, I came across a wooden plaque. Cantor Suffren referenced this, which said, the plaque said, "If I had my life to live over, my one wish would be that I could have known you sooner so I could love you longer." 57 years is a good chunk of time, but not enough. To that point, this past Father's Day, less than 2 weeks before the end came, I composed a love letter to Barb and had the chance to read it to her. "Dearest Barb, how did I get to be so lucky to have you come into my life? That $5 bill your father gave you as you went off to college was one of the greatest investments he ever made. Don't call home until you've joined Hillel. How fortunate it was for me that Rabbi Elephant, there's that name again, had a previous engagement and asked me to stand in for him on religious convocation night. Since then, my life changed remarkably for the better. Thank you for being the special person you are, for being the center of my universe. You are a once-in-a-generation woman. I am filled up with gratitude, with love, with an abundance of memories, and most of all, being able to be in your presence every single day. Your wisdom, your ability to make me smile and to laugh at myself, to enable me to feel that being with you is the single most important and best thing I do, has given my life a sacred purpose. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to make you happy and to protect you. Thank you for making me a better person, for expanding my perspective on life. I am so proud of you for what you have accomplished, making our two children good people, sharing the best of yourself so effortlessly with others. Your thoughtfulness, the list goes on and on. I thank you for the greatest gift of all, making me a part of your life. I love you so much. Love, Jeff." David has me a few times had said to me a few times in recent days that I had hit the jackpot with Barb. He is so right. Before going back to bed in the morning, I would hear her as she poked her head around the corner to check in on me while I was having breakfast. She would wave and she would say, and I would echo back to her, "Nighty night. Sleep well. I love you."
What a blessing to hear such words of love and to find that there is laughter amidst the tears. I'm going to quickly share a piece of poetry that Barb loved. It's not great, but it's called How Do You Live Your Dash? And it makes a great point that is appropriate. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on her tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came her date of birth and spoke the following date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was the dash between those years. For that dash represents all the time that she spent alive on earth. And now only those who loved her know what that little line is worth. For it matters not how much we own, the cars, the house, the cash. What matters is how we live and love and how we spend our dash. If you're able to, I'd like to ask you to please rise for El Maleh Rachamim. El Maleh Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utorim, Kizoha Harakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat, Bracha Bat Binyamin Miriam, Shehalcha Leolama, Baal Harachamim Yastirecha, Beseit Knafav Leolamim, V'yitzror b'yitzror hachayim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Barbara Lazar, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in your eternal presence, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May she find a home with you, and may she rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. In a moment, we're going to recite Mourner's Kaddish, and I'm going to ask Jeff and David to place earth on the casket. I'm going to then ask everyone to form two lines so that they can return to Temple Beth Elohim, and we can affirm life with food and sharing of stories, of memories. And then if anyone else wishes, they can throw earth on the casket. David. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach. God you have given, God you have taken away. Blessed be the name of God. Words of Mourners Kaddish can be found on the back page of the handout. And we join together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'vyomechon, u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Hu ya'aseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Hu yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Jeff and David, I'm going to ask you to place earth flowers. Now, can I invite everybody, if you will, form two lines facing one another. And in a few moments, I'm going to invite Jeff and David to walk through those lines and to return to the temple. And my hope is that you will come to the temple where it's air conditioned and share memories. Jeff, I know about the two ships. People, it's so hot. I know that was one more piece that Barb loved.
That's all right. That's all right. Say again? That's a Carol Mitchell painting. Oh my. So they tended to her. Thank you so much, Joey.
It was beautiful. What you both shared was absolutely magnificent. All right, I'm going to send you to